My 26th birthday was celebrated a few weeks ago. Sonder is my name. It was a nice life. I was engaged to my college sweetheart Jake, and our wedding was just around the corner. Everything seemed to be going well until my mom decided to throw a wrench in the works. I was sitting back on the couch looking through a bridal magazine when my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen. In answer, I said, "Hey Mom, what's up?" "Sander, honey, I need your opinion," she uttered with a squeal of joy. "Which kind of suit do you think will go best on Tom as he walks you down the aisle? I'm thinking maybe black is more conventional, but maybe blue is better." I blinked, confused. "Mom, what are you talking about? I'm having my grandfather lead me down the aisle." The individual on the other end of the call paused. "So what takes place next?" "No, that's Tom in command. He wants to practice so he can tell when it's his daughter's turn because she is an adolescent." I got myself straight and put my magazine down. "Work out?" "Mother, I'm not here to serve as a dummy for when your lover gets to be the father of the bride." Grandpa is leading me down the aisle at the conclusion of the tale. "But Tom—" "I don't care about Tom," I screamed, surprising even myself with my level of rage. "I decline to be his experiment subject. If he is so anxious to practice, tell him to locate another wedding to wreck." "Sander, listen to me, Elizabeth Carter." I hung up. The next instant it rang again, but I ignored it, tossing it aside in case it had burned me. As I sat there, my pulse raced and memories started to flood back. My dad's expression, his warm smile, and the way he'd swing me around the backyard. He died when I was 10 years old, leaving a hole in our family's life that my mother had tried her hardest to fill. I remembered the line of guys who followed, all truck drivers who worked for Mom's company, the transportation company. When she brought them home, she would introduce each one of them as her future husband and my prospective stepfather. But they didn't last long. Mom was desperate and obnoxious. After she scared them away, another Mr. Right would appear, and so on, in an endless cycle. Buried in my own memories, I sat there thinking about those tumultuous years I'd spent running for safety with my grandparents. They provided me with a haven of safety amidst the chaos at home. I think I was around 13 when things really started to get out of control. One day, I came home from school and saw this woman I had never seen before yelling at each other, Mom and her. "You home wrecking?" the stranger yelled, his face a scarlet mask of anger. "That's my husband." "Never one to back down," Mom shot back. He informed me that he was single. "I have nothing to do with your marital problems." And there he was, the new boyfriend of Mom, lounging in our old recliner. I think his name was Dave or Dan. I was, to be honest, getting lost. He was watching the two women duel, wearing a smug smile, as if this was some strange kind of entertainment. In the foyer, I stood frozen in place as my shoulder bag slipped off my back. "Mom," I moaned aloud. The two women gave me a raised gaze. The stranger's eyes widened, then narrowed, asking, "Is this your daughter?" She spat at Mom. "Does she know what kind of woman her mother is?" Mother angrily retorted, "Leave her out of this." Dorand eventually stood up. Ladies, there's no need to fight." He lowered his voice. "I am more than willing to share myself." The stranger charged at him, crying out in a hoarse voice. That was my cue to flee and hide in my room until the screaming stopped. That night, I could hear Mom crying through the thin walls of our apartment. With Dorand and his wife gone, Mom was on her own again. Growing older didn't make things better. When I was 15, I was doing everything I could to avoid going home. It was not simply that Mom's lovers changed all the time. It was also the way they looked at me. As I was getting a snack from the kitchen, I noticed one guy, Rick. "Your girl is filling out nicely," I told Mom. Mom just laughed. "She takes after me," she said with pride, completely oblivious to my uneasiness. I started to spend more time at the library, at friends' houses, and other places other than at home. Mom, though, didn't get it. She would call me selfish if I didn't want to hang out with her and her new guy. She said to Sander one day, "Sander, honey, come meet Jeff. He's a really good kid. We three could have such a contented family." Observing Jeff and the way his gaze ran over me made me feel awful. "No thanks," I said, and went back to my room. That night, I gave my grandpa a call. "Can I come stay with you for a while?" I asked, trying not to look too desperate. He answered right away, "Of course, sweet pea. You're always welcome here." My grandparents were the first to notice something was wrong. One evening, as we sat around their kitchen table, the words just spilled out of me. I told them everything, including Mom's total ignorance, the procession of men, and the uncomfortable expressions. When I was finished, Grandma had tears in her eyes, and Grandpa's face was set in a hard line I had never seen before. He said, "Enough," in a low, harsh voice. "We're putting a stop to this right now." The next day, we drove to Mom's house. Grandpa did not waste any time. "Carol, what you're doing is dangerous and immoral. There's a little child in your house, and you're bringing strange men in. Do you know of any possible consequences?" Mom's cheeks became red. "How dare you?" she yelled. "You've never wanted to see me happy. You are trying to ruin my life." "Your life?" Grandpa answered back. "What about Sander's life? To what extent is she safe?" Mom reassured me that Sander was okay. "She's just being dramatic." "What the heck? Will you take her away from me? Is that the only thing about it?" Papa nodded. "Sander wants to live with us. You can handle your personal matters without putting her in jeopardy." "It's okay," Mom said. "Take her in your arms. It will be easier to meet a quality man without some teenager getting in the way of my style." Her comments were like a kick to the gut. I knew deep down that Mom felt like I was a burden sometimes, but hearing her say it out loud hurt far more than I expected. Grandma squeezed my shoulder. "Sweetheart, go pack your things," she said. With a nod, I stumbled back to my room. I was still hearing my parents bickering in the living room as I packed my clothes into a duffel bag. When I got back, Mom was waiting with her arms folded beside the door. "So this is it, huh?" she exclaimed. "You're choosing them over me?" I gave her a thorough study. She seemed somehow more delicate, somehow smaller, maybe for the first time. For a moment, beyond the confident exterior, I could see the shy, lonely woman. I whispered to my mother, "Mom, I'm choosing me. I hope someday you'll understand that." She simply turned away without responding as my grandparents and I were leaving the house. As we drove away, I saw my boyhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. I had no idea what was ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt protected. It seemed like visiting a new planet when I moved in with my grandparents. The never-ending fear, the odd men's parade, and the late-night arguments had all vanished. Instead, I found myself surrounded by love, security, and support. Even though I continued to attend the same school and see my classmates, everything felt better. Without having to worry about what or who I would find when I arrived home, I could concentrate on my schoolwork. Mom was, well, Mom. Every now and again, she would call and either whine about her job or discuss her new lover. She didn't ask questions about me very often, and when she did, she didn't seem to be paying much attention. When graduation day rolled around, I was surprised to see her there. She sat with my grandparents, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "You look nice, honey," she said after the ceremony, giving me a quick hug. "Listen, I've got to run. I've got a date with this great guy I met at work. You understand, right?" And just like that, she was gone. I watched her rush off, feeling a mixture of hurt and relief. My grandparents helped me move into my dorm room that fall, setting me up with everything I needed for college. I decided to study to become an investment manager, fascinated by the world of finance and planning. That's where I met Jake. We were in the same Introduction to Financial Markets class, both of us bright-eyed freshmen with big dreams. We became friends first, study buddies who'd quiz each other late into the night at the campus coffee shop. It wasn't until our senior year that things shifted. We were working on a group project, hunched over spreadsheets in the library, when Jake suddenly looked up at me. "Sander," he said, his voice serious, "I think I'm in love with you." I blinked at him, surprised, and then I realized I felt the same way. Our relationship blossomed quickly after that. Jake was kind, smart, and stable. Everything I'd never had in my life with Mom. When he proposed after graduation, I didn't hesitate to say yes. I saw Mom a few times during those years, usually when I'd stop by her place during breaks. Her new boyfriend Tom was always there, younger than her, with slicked back hair and a cocky grin. "Sander, this is Tom," Mom had said, beaming. "He's got a daughter 7 years younger than you. Isn't that great?" I smiled politely, not sure what to say. Tom had looked me up and down in a way that made me uncomfortable, reminding me of all those boyfriends from years ago. After reliving all these memories, I knew I needed to talk to Grandpa. Jake and I drove out to my grandparents' house one weekend, the weight of Mom's demand heavy on my mind. "Grandpa," I said as we sat in their cozy living room, "Mom called me about the wedding. She wants her boyfriend Tom to walk me down the aisle. She says he wants to practice for when his own daughter gets married." Grandpa reached out and took my hand. "Sander, I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle. But if you wanted to choose Tom or anyone else, I'd understand. It's your day." I shook my head, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "There's no choice to make, Grandpa. It's always been you." Jake, sitting next to me, squeezed my other hand. "I support whatever Sander wants," he said. "She's told me about everything you've done for her, sir. I can't think of anyone better to give her away." Grandpa smiled, his eyes suspiciously moist. "Well then," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I guess we'd better start practicing our walk, hadn't we?" As we all laughed, I felt a wave of love and gratitude wash over me. This was my real family, the people who'd stood by me, supported me, loved me unconditionally. And in a few short weeks, I'd be adding Jake to that family officially. I thought I'd put an end to Mom's ridiculous demands, but apparently, I'd underestimated her determination. The calls kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. "Sander, you need to reconsider," Mom pleaded one evening. "Tom's really upset. If you don't let him walk you down the aisle, he might leave me." "Then maybe he's not the right guy for you," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "Look, I'm busy planning my wedding. Can we please drop this?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Mom spoke again, her voice was cold. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, I won't come to your wedding at all." Something inside me snapped. "You know what? Fine. Don't come. It's not like you've been a real mother to me." Anyway, I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. Part of me felt guilty for lashing out, but a bigger part felt relieved, like I'd finally said what I'd been holding back for years. Days passed, and I started to think maybe that was the end of it. Maybe Mom had finally gotten the message. I threw myself into wedding planning, grateful for the distraction. But then, about a week later, I was at work when my boss, Mr. Johnson, called me into his office. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. Mom was there, mascara streaking down her face, with Tom hovering behind her like a bodyguard. "Sander," Mom cried, throwing herself at me. "How could you be so cruel to your own mother?" I stood frozen, completely blindsided. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I asked. She turned to Mr. Johnson, who was watching the scene with wide eyes. Mr. Johnson, you have to talk some sense into her. She's breaking her poor mother's heart. Mr. Johnson stammered, clearly out of his depth. Mom barreled on, gesturing wildly between herself and Tom. She won't let her parents walk her down the aisle at her wedding? Can you believe it? After everything we've done for her, please make her listen to reason. Before anyone could say anything else, Mom grabbed Tom's arm and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Johnson leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Sander, I think you owe me an explanation. What exactly is going on? Haltingly, I began to explain about my childhood, about Liv living with my grandparents, and about Mom's revolving door of boyfriends. I told him about her insistence that Tom walk me down the aisle and my refusal. To my surprise, Mr. Johnson's face softened as I spoke. When I finished, he let out a long sigh. You know, Sander, your mother reminds me a lot of my ex-wife, he said, shaking his head. I divorced her because of similar dramatic tendencies, always making everything about her, never considering how her actions affected others. Relief washed over me. So you understand? He nodded. I do. And I want you to know that I'm on your side here. Your wedding day is about you, not your mother or her boyfriend. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I really appreciate that. However, he continued, his tone turning serious. We can't have scenes like this at the office. It's unprofessional and disruptive. I need you to handle this situation, Sander. Make sure it doesn't happen again. As I left Mr. Johnson's office, relief gave way to anger. How dare Mom show up at my workplace like that? She could have cost me my job. My first stop was the security desk. I explained the situation to Dave, the head of security, showing him a picture of Mom and Tom on my phone. These two are not to be allowed in the building under any circumstances, I said firmly. If they show up, please call the police immediately. Back at my desk, I opened my email, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I typed out a message to Mom. Mom, your behavior today was completely unacceptable. You had no right to show up at my workplace and cause a scene. You could have jeopardized my career with your selfish actions. I've tried to be patient with you, tried to explain my feelings, but you refused to listen. So let me be crystal clear. You are no longer invited to my wedding. Neither is Tom. I'm asking you, no, I'm telling you, to stay away from me. Don't call, don't email, don't show up at my work or my home. If you can't respect my boundaries, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then sat back, feeling both drained and oddly liberated. That evening, I told Jake what had happened. He wrapped me in a tight hug. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, he said, but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. We called my grandparents and Jake's parents, explaining the situation. To my relief, they all supported my decision. As Jake and I went through our wedding guest list that night, crossing off Mom and Tom's names, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Our wedding would be smaller now, but it would be filled with people who truly loved and supported us. Are you okay? Jake asked, squeezing my hand. I looked at him, at the love and concern in his eyes, and felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Yeah, I said, squeezing back. I really am. And I meant it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life, setting boundaries and surrounding myself with people who genuinely cared about me. It wasn't how I'd imagined my wedding planning would go, but somehow it felt right. The day I'd dreamed of for so long had finally arrived. I stood at the chapel doors, my heart fluttering with excitement. Grandpa, dapper in his tuxedo, squeezed my hand reassuringly. The music swelled, and we took our first step. But before we could even enter the chapel, a shrill voice cut through the air. "Stop right there!" Mom came barreling down the aisle, Tom hot on her heels. She jabbed a finger at Grandpa. "You move aside. Tom's walking Sander down the aisle." I couldn't believe it. After everything, she was still trying to make my wedding about her. "Mom, what are you doing here? You weren't invited. Please leave now." Mom's expression fell, and the tears began. I'd witnessed this performance far too often to be duped. "How could you be so unkind? You were raised by me. After your father passed away, I loved you." Grandpa finally spoke out after being silent for a while. "That's enough, Carol. Everyone in this room is aware of the true identity of Sander's parentage." I took a quick look at our visitors. Their expressions were a mixture of pity, shock, and, was that a tinge of humor? It was obvious that Mom was losing fans to her antics. Mom must have realized too, for she abruptly altered her strategy. "All right," she spit out. "Sander, I don't need you. Tom is with me. He values me more than you do. You've always acted conceited and foolish." "I reject you," Grandpa interrupted before I could reply, his voice icy. "Well, Carol, if that's how you feel, allow me to add my thoughts as well. Yes, you are no longer welcome in my home. I am writing this to you out of my own will." Tom's attitude instantly and almost humorously changed. He turned pale and stepped away from Mom. "I'm sorry, Carol, but I didn't sign up for this much drama. Furthermore, let's just state that I think it would be better for me to find a younger partner if I didn't have the property and inheritance." "We're through." Mom's angry face twisted. She screamed silently and began tugging at her hair. "Everyone is against me. You are really daring. I will demonstrate to you." Before she could complete her threat, 2 policemen showed up by her side. One of the visitors had discreetly phoned for them. One of them firmly remarked, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," as they escorted Mom out of the chapel with her cries resonating. My feelings were a curious mixture of relief, sadness, and strangely enough, sympathy. For her, this was her lowest point, and I secretly hoped that it would be the wake-up call she needed after all. After having some time to retouch my cosmetics and de-stress, I met Grandpa at the chapel doors 30 minutes later. Jake was waiting for me at the altar, his expression filled with concern and love as we made our way down the aisle. The drama of the last hour vanished as soon as our eyes locked. Nothing, not even my mother's antics, could take away from us this moment. There were many happy tears and laughing during the lovely event. And as Jake and I exchanged our first kiss as husband and wife, I knew that no matter what obstacles life threw at us, we would overcome them as a couple, supported and loved by our real family. One after another, at the reception, came up to us with words of support and criticism for my mother's actions. My college roommate gave me a strong hug and added, "You handled that like a champ, Sander." Jake's uncle complained, "Your mom has a lot of nerve, but you showed her what true class looks like." I felt a calmness descend upon me as Jake and I took off on our honeymoon. The ordeal involving Mom was now in the past. I was eager to see what adventures our new life would hold as we embarked on our new journey. 1 year has passed after the wedding, and a calm new routine has been established in life. Our offices are conveniently close to our comfortable apartment where Jake and I reside. It's not large, but it's ours, full of laughter and love. We discuss about our future goals as we stroll hand in hand to work every morning. We now have a reliable source of rental income from the house Mom used to live in and where I grew up. We've made the most of it by saving more money for the future and occasionally treating ourselves to weekend trips. Regarding Mom, I occasionally hear tidings through the grapevine. She appears to be renting a modest apartment across town and, in line with her usual behavior, she's looking for her next soulmate. I suppose some things never really change. Since the wedding, I haven't communicated with her. I know I made the correct decision, even if there are moments when I am slightly guilty about it, because of the years of turmoil, the never-ending drama, and the way she attempted to ruin one of the most significant days of my life. As Jake and I are enjoying breakfast on our small balcony one lovely Saturday morning, he says, "Do you ever think about reaching out to your mom?" I sip my coffee and think about the query. On sometimes, I concede. But then I realize how calm and drama-free our life is right now, and I'm not ready to risk that. Jake nods sympathetically. You do realize that I'll back whatever you decide? Smiling, I reach across the table to give him a quick squeeze. It means everything to me, and I know that. Later on in the day, we see a mother and daughter enjoying a picnic in the park. With their heads pressed close together, they are laughing and joking around. I had a fleeting feeling of what could have been. But then I remember my grandparents, who make a Sunday phone call without fail. I consider Jake's parents, who have welcomed me into their family as a daughter. I consider our friends, who have supported us through everything, including the disastrous wedding, and have been there for us always. I understand that a family isn't always made up of blood. It's about the individuals who support, stand for, and love you without conditions. And I'm affluent beyond my wildest expectations by that standard.